illness or that death, but you don't believe like you did. It could have been when you were touched the wrong way, or when you were taken advantage of, when you knew that things would never be the same, but you don't believe like you did. Or when your dreams did not work out the way they should have, or when you lost that home or that job, or when the conviction and that sentence was read, or when you think about why you're still single, or when you're trying to find a reason to stay in your marriage, but you don't believe like you did. Young people, adults, if some of us, maybe not all, but if some of us were to be honest, we could say that we feel like we've seen God die. But everybody in church still wants to shout. Everybody wants to tell you how good God is. Everybody wants to testify about how God has shown up in their life. And everybody, listen. Young people specifically, listen. If people were to be honest, when things don't look good in life, when you were trying to figure out, do you even want to keep on living? Even the oldest, wisest, erudite, sagacious, strongest, has a pew reserved in heaven Christian can sometimes get annoyed by people talking about how good God is. Even if you're holy enough not to get annoyed, you still might not be as excited as everyone else is, because as far as you're concerned, you have not seen God. You need to see him for yourself. This is what Thomas is dealing with in the text message of John chapter 20, verses 24 through 29. Summary of the text message is simple. Jesus was raised from the dead. The same day that Jesus was raised from the dead, he went to see the disciples, but Thomas wasn't there. So all the disciples know that Jesus is alive, except Thomas. They come and tell Thomas, hey, we saw Jesus. Thomas says, tell you what, unless I see Jesus and I put my hand in his wounds, I'm not going to believe that he's back. Jesus eventually shows up 8 days later and tells Thomas, hey, give me your hand, put your hand in my wounds. And when that happens, Thomas goes, my God, he realizes that this really is Jesus. And Jesus simply says, hey, you believe because you saw me, but blessed are those who believe without seeing. Thomas knows Jesus died. He knows that Jesus was crucified. He knows he hung there. He knows that there are holes from the nails in his hand. He knows that there's a hole in his side from the spear. He knows that Jesus was buried. He saw that man die. But the other 10 disciples who were left keep telling him that he's alive and that they saw him. And people talk about Thomas badly because he didn't believe that Jesus was alive. But I personally like Thomas. I think Thomas is like a regular person, because if you told me that my grandmother showed up at my house yesterday, I'm going to tell you the same thing Thomas said about Jesus. Tell you what, when she come by my house and she sees me, first thing I'm doing is leaving. But after that, I grant you your statement that she's back. But so I like Thomas, and we can learn a lot from Thomas's situation. In case you have seen him die. I know an explanation is necessary. I'm going to hit this and go. I'm going to hit it to go. So please remember this. Using my spiritual imagination, I figured that I would hit up Thomas on my spiritual soul phone so I could get the story directly from him. I said, Tom, my man, what's good? Thomas said, I'm straight, Hough, just scrolling through Facebook, because that's what I imagine Thomas doing in my imagination. How can I help you? I said, I just need a quick summary of this text message that John sent, chapter 20, verses 24 through 29. Thomas said, oh, yeah, everybody always wants to ask me about that one. Well, look, this is what happened. The same day that Jesus rose from the grave, he showed himself to the other 10 disciples, because Judas wasn't there. The other 10 disciples. The problem is, I wasn't there. I said, what happened, Tom? You on Facebook? Thomas said, don't get smart. I said, my fault. Anyway, Thomas said, I wasn't there. They told me all about it, but I told them that I wouldn't believe that Jesus was back unless I saw him for myself. I had to put my fingers in his wounds. I said, okay, I got that. Thomas said, so 8 days later, while we're in the place with the doors closed, Jesus showed up. He told me to put my hands in his wounds. I said, then what? He said, Hough, at that point, I had to believe. I said, my Lord and my God. Jesus said, I believe because I saw him. But everybody else who doesn't see him and believes, they're more blessed. I said, thanks a lot, I appreciate it. He said, no problem. Next time, ask me about something else, though, because I'm tired of talking about this. I said, got it. So let's see what you learned. Number one, First point, hang around. Hang around. In case you have seen him die, hang around. It was 8 days from when Thomas heard about Jesus to when he actually saw him. Now, Thomas is still hanging with the disciples. So that's 8 days of hearing about Jesus being back, but Thomas not believing it or seeing him. 8 days is a long time to hear about something and to not see it. If I wait too long to get a package in the mail, I'm calling somebody to make sure that it was sent. I don't like waiting for someone while they tell me that they're on their way. Spending 8 days with people saying that Jesus is back and you have not seen him has to be difficult. You are still sad while they're happy. You're still depressed while they're so excited. It's like I always hear some young girls, only some, not all, but some young girls, they mad and they salty because all their friends are booed up, all their friends got a man except them, so they have to hang out with couples while it's just them and Jesus. So that's it, it's just them and Jesus. And they get really annoyed because they're tired of everybody else having this experience and they don't have it themselves. Thomas has to hang around for 8 days hearing that he should not be sad, hearing that he should not be hurt, hearing that Jesus is back, but he can't believe it. He was still hanging around though. And because he hung around long enough, the man that he saw die showed up. If you have seen him die in your life, hang around. I always say, I was just telling the young people at Bible study that we have to be careful because when things aren't going right spiritually, we have a tendency to do things to make it worse. Like we never go back to what we're supposed to do. We always do things to make it worse. I always say, look, if your breath smells, you don't find something worse to eat. If your hair is messed up, you don't go make it worse. And if you feel like God is not around, you don't leave the one place that he might show up. Sometimes we naturally want to do the opposite of what we should do. A good example, when I was a kid, I used to get a lot of nosebleeds, and everybody does the same thing. You start, you squeeze your nose so the blood doesn't run out. And everybody would tell me, hold your head back. And that just seemed to make sense, right? Blood's running down, you close your nose, you hold your head back. And then I found out later, no, the best thing to do is hold your head down. Didn't make sense to me, but eventually I would do it and my nose would stop bleeding. I naturally wanted to do something that was not helping me, but that's just how I function. What I really needed to do was something very different. We're the same way in our faith. When things are going wrong, we naturally want to do the wrong thing. When people feel like God is gone, instead of hanging around with the people they should be around, people leave. They stop praying, they stop reading, they stop trying, they start doing things they shouldn't do. But Thomas's experience shows us that we need to hang around. We should keep doing what we are supposed to do. Because if Jesus is going to show up, if God is going to show up, he's going to show up to the people who have hung around. Let me be clear, young adults, I need to be clear, young adults, young people, and adults. No matter what may happen, hang around people who know Jesus. Hang around people who, for all the dead relationships and drama that happens in life, hang around people who know Jesus. That's what Thomas did. If you've got into some trouble and you were just getting back on your feet, get to and hang around people who know Jesus. Even if you're not sure if Jesus is around, even if you're not sure if he's going to make a difference, even if it's annoying to hear people constantly talking about how good God is and all that he has done for them, hang around people who know Jesus. Things are going to happen to make you wonder about God. You may even doubt God at some point. As bad as it gets, hang around people who know Jesus. Side note, I didn't say hang around church folk. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Now hold on, I'm not gonna stay here long. I'm not trying to beat up or bash anybody. I didn't say church folk. I said people who know Jesus. There's a phrase out there that there are people who are experts in churchianity instead of Christianity. So when I say know Jesus, I mean people who actually understand what it is to have faith and to live for Christ. they are in church. I'm just saying that not everybody in church is that person. So make sure they know Jesus. But that's a digression. I digress. So keep reading, keep praying, keep trying, because when Jesus shows up, it's going to be around the people who know Jesus. So the first thing that we learn, in case you've seen him die, is number one, hang around. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. Number two, follow instructions. I know an explanation is still necessary. Listen, this point is simple and very short. When Jesus shows up, he gives Thomas instructions. Now, according to Thomas's own requirements, he doesn't believe that this is Jesus yet. Thomas said he'd have to feel his wounds. That didn't happen yet. So as of right now, this is still just somebody that looks like Jesus. So Thomas has to follow instructions from a man who he is not completely sure is Jesus. But following those directions and doing what Jesus said gave Thomas the proof that he needed. This shows us that you continue to follow God's word, even when you're in a rough spot. You will get what you were looking for from him. He was hanging around the right people. Now he has to follow instructions. When things are going bad in our lives, in case you've seen him die, young people, adults, stay true to God's word. It will lead you to God. Follow the instructions even when you don't want to. It will lead you to God. Read the instruction manual, the Bible. Get help and understanding with it. Don't just read it and think you got it all together. Understand it. Follow instructions. It will lead you back to God. It's plain and simple. I'm not going to stay there. If you're going through those dark moments, follow God's word. Even when you don't want to, it'll lead you back to God. That's point two, follow instructions. But there is a big side note here. The question becomes, why did Thomas need to feel Jesus' wounds? Simple, because he saw that man die. And he was not going to believe any version of Jesus other than the one he saw die. He needed to know that the Jesus who was showing up was the same exact Jesus that he saw die. Why is this important to us? Why am I making so much of a point of that? Because when you've seen him die, or when you haven't seen or heard from God in a while, if you're not careful, you may start to follow another God. Listen, Kanye West's last verse on the 2012 song, Click, says, went through deep depression when my mama passed. Suicide, what kind of talk is that? But I've been talking to God for so long that if you look at my life, I guess he's talking back. What Kanye is simply saying is that he was going through a hard time when his mother died, to the point that he was thinking about suicide. He had been praying for so long during this period, but when he looks at his success, he feels that God is talking back to him. Now, I'm not going to say that God isn't blessing him through success, but financial success does not mean that God is blessing you. Having a lot of money means that you have a lot of money. You can be financially successful doing the wrong thing. If you start thinking that God speaks through money, then 99% of this country will always wonder why God isn't blessing them. That's not who God is. That's another God that someone made up. And that can happen when we're going through things that don't look right. Like we are looking for something, anything to make us feel better, and next thing you know, you try to find God in things that God's not in. Now you think that God is doing stuff that God's not doing. Now you think that things that are connected to him, things that are not connected to him are connected to him. That's a problem, because when those things don't last, now you're mad with God again, and he wasn't involved with it in the first place. The reality is, we have a tendency to keep changing God around to fit our scenario. I feel really bad right now, Lord, I don't know where you are. Next thing you know, you go, oh, that woman was for me. And what you really are saying is you need companionship, but you just found a woman. Next thing you know, you got 6 kids with this woman, and you're going, God, I don't know what happened. I do. You found God where God was not. We need to be like Thomas. He had to check the wounds. You need to check the wounds. Even though all of his boys believed, even though all of Thomas's boys believed, he needed to make sure that he wasn't getting fooled. And we have to do the same thing. I don't care who your friends think that God is. There's an old phrase that says you need to know him for yourself. You got to check the wounds, read the word, learn more, know what to actually expect from a relationship with God. So no matter how bad things have been, you won't be fooled by an idea of God that just looks good. And the sad thing is, and I say this is a big side note, the sad thing is that too many young people and adults have actually been taught about the wrong God. So now I have people calling me with problems and issues about how come God did this, that, and the other. And I'm like, God has nothing to do with that. But you've watched enough TV, you've heard enough radio, you heard enough people who's just like talking nonsense that now you think God is something he's not. You don't even know the faith you're following. Read the word, learn more, follow the instructions, check the wounds. Jesus is about love. He's about salvation. That's where you start off. That's where you start. And honestly, you don't go much further than that. Side note. Anyway, follow the instructions. So number one, hang around. Number two, follow the instructions. Number three, and I'm out your way, you got to feel him. Young people, y'all stay with me? Good. Nobody sleep, right? Good. All right, awesome. Let me say this and I'm done. I mentioned that although I am perfectly educated and equipped to argue against God, I don't. As a matter of fact, it's obvious I am a preacher. How did that happen? Simple. I had a personal, undeniable, and private experience with God by way of Jesus Christ. With that experience, there is no technical argument that you can give me that's going to shake my faith. After Thomas felt Jesus, he knew without a doubt that Jesus was risen and that he was Lord. Young people, adults, after you feel Jesus, nothing can be argued against him. There may be great intellectual points, awesome research, and historical accounts. Science may keep advancing into great and wonderfully amazing areas. But once you feel him, there are some things that can no longer be shaken. I have great friends who are atheists and don't believe in God even a little bit. Honestly, they are nicer and kinder than many Christians I know, but that's another issue. We can sit and have conversations about religion and history, culture, and sociological developments that lead to where we are today. But the same way you cannot tell me that I don't have African roots because I have melanin in my skin and I have a wider nose because of my African heritage in which we had taken more air, and because my hair is tighter curled to make sure that my head is protected from the beaming downs. The same way you can't tell me that I don't have African roots is the same way that you cannot tell me that God is dead or that God is not real and that Jesus, the Son of God, is not my Savior. Because I can feel him. This is how you know that it's God, because this part, and I'm sorry, and I know we always want this, but I gotta say, this part can't be logically explained. That although everyone can argue against it, there are all these people of all different intelligence levels, of all different backgrounds, of all different educational levels and status that can tell you that they have felt God move in their life. Young people, adults, I'm not talking about looking at a blessing. I mean, you have actually felt something move. You don't have to be shouting. You don't have to be praying. You don't have to be singing. Sometimes you just have to hang around and you will feel something. You can feel it when people start to praise. The atmosphere gets a little bit thicker. The environment becomes a little more serious. God is moving even though the world tries to kill him. God is moving even though it seems like he doesn't exist sometimes. God is moving even though people want to act like he's not. And you can feel him if you just pay some attention. There is one thing that will stop you from feeling him. To everybody in the church, there's only one thing that will stop you from feeling God when he's moving. Only one. And that one thing is if you don't want to. If you are so mad and turned off about what's happened in your life that you won't try, or if you are too dignified to acknowledge his presence, if you have made up in your mind that this is just foolishness, if you just visiting and you want to get out of here, if you are turned off by other people's praise. I've seen atheists start to cry a little bit, but then shake it off and say they were just being emotional. And I kind of go, what, you don't think God works through emotions too? I married my wife because of emotions. I broke up with my exes because of emotions. I picked my friends because of emotions. All of a sudden, emotions are bad now. God can't use emotions all of a sudden. If you don't want to feel him, you won't. But if you don't have that issue, then if you have ever had a time in your life that was bad enough, in your darkest moments, when you don't know where Jesus is, when you doubt because of what the world says, when you doubt because you aren't doing as well as someone else, when it seems that prayers are not answered, when all the other examples of Christians are horrible, in case you've seen him die, hang around some real believers. Number one, hang around. Number two, follow instructions. And number three, make sure that you're reaching out to feel him. The reality is, and I'll finish with this, and I'm done, but the reality is, what you got to remember, even with the crucifixion and with Jesus dying on the cross, the devil was looking to make us, make all of us I'll call it a were factor. I'll say the was factor, but that's not good English, but the were factor. See, without Jesus, just looking at Thomas and the disciples, without Jesus coming back, the disciples were just going to stay in the house. The disciples were just going to keep hiding, and Thomas was just going to run and not continue on with ministry. That was the goal. See, the idea is if I can convince you that Jesus is dead, I can also convince you to be part of the were/was factor. I like was. I'm sorry. I'm urban. I like was. You was going to do something special. But you don't believe me. You was going to do something great with the power of God, but God's dead. You was going to be something someday, but you think God is dead. You were going to get over that hump. You were going to get out of that situation. You were going to do those things, but since God is dead, you can't do them. The enemy is always trying to make you part of the was factor. But if you can believe that Jesus is still here, then you can move from the was factor and you can start doing something with your life. So you can look at the enemy and simply say, you tried to make me the was factor, but I is. I know that's bad English too. I know. Trust me, I know. I've been to school. I promise you I've had education. I promise. You tried to make me was, but now I'm is. I'm is. That's what I am. I'm is. I like I'm is because it says it's current right here, right now. I'm is. That's. Can anybody just shout to the devil and say I'm is? I know that bothers you, but can anybody say I'm is? Look, I've got to get out of here. I didn't plan on going here, but if there's anybody in the house that can look back over your life and realize that there were times where you didn't know how you were going to make it, you had some dark moments, you looked around and didn't know where your help was coming from, you've seen God die, can anybody say that you hung around long enough that Jesus decided to show up just for you? Then you make sure, if you ever see anybody else trying to figure out, is God real, is God around, do them a favor. Make sure that you stay close to them. Make sure that they're always hanging around somebody that knows God. Make sure you try to keep them on track to follow some instructions. And let them know that Jesus is going to show up eventually, that you'll be able to feel him. And if you're in the house and you're not at that stage, you're not trying to help somebody else along the way, you're trying to figure it out for yourself, specifically young people, young adults, you just don't know God like that. Listen, I promise you, keep hanging around. The challenge. Hanging around is not the problem. Feeling them is not the problem. The challenge is trying to block out all the times you thought you saw him get killed. Why do I feel this? How do I follow God when all of this other stuff is there? I mean, you got science blasting in your head. You got atheists blasting into your head. You got all these other things. You got people talking bad about organized religion and all this stuff. And on the other side, you know you felt something. That's the challenge. How do you split this? I've seen young people get completely caught up in the spirit, but just not know what to do with it because you're not supposed to do that, right? You're trying to fight this battle. That's the challenge. So for the mature Christians, keep them around you. Make sure that they can push through. Because one day, later on in the journey, you might need somebody to hang around you as well. But to those of you who don't know, to those of you who are still growing, just hang around. And I promise you, if you stay open to it, you will never have a doubt again about God moving in your life.